Welcome to the Wise and Happy Life podcast, where ancient wisdom meets modern science, and mindfulness, philosophy, and happiness practices blend with neuroscience, compassion, and common sense. Hosted by Bob Martin, meditation mentor, happiness coach, trial lawyer, and entrepreneur. This podcast explores how to live with grace, presence, and purpose in a complex world.
Hello, good people, and welcome to another episode of A Wise and Happy Life. And as you all know, I always like to start off with a story or maybe a quote or something that sets the stage for our guest, who is amazing, by the way. I want to tell you about a woman I once knew. I was attending a Unity Church service. Unity Church is one of those almost Christian denominations, based on, I suppose, on Christianity, but kind of more in tune with Unitarianism and the like. And I met this woman, and I got to know her after a bit. And I just have to say that her memory always stays in my consciousness because she was just the kind of person who, no matter what you said, no matter what your complaint was, no matter who you were upset by or what you were upset by, her automatic response was always kind and accepting. And you run into people like that from time to time, and they just become posters in your memory because you just wonder what it is like to have a database and a mind that simply responds with kindness to everything and sees everything in a much broader view that can open up a different way of seeing things for you. And that is who we have with us today, Swami Nityananda, who simply can be introduced as a person who loves life and loves people. And she has a long resume, but if we got it down to the very, very core of it, that would be it. So, Swami, thank you for your presence. Thank you for your wisdom, and thank you for coming on the show and sharing with us a little bit of your story and engaging with us in a conversation of how the truths that are at the core of all religious teachings are really the same.
Bob, thank you for the warmth of that introduction. That was honestly such a kind and generous introduction. It made me smile so much. And I agree with you. I would say that every human, I think, has the ability to cultivate that kindness that you were talking about. And I would say that's actually our true nature. So when we're coming from the heart, one of the ways I think this is put in the tradition of teachings of Jesus is overcome hardness of heart within yourself. And so I think if you overcome hardness of heart within yourself, and that means that you're getting out of the way of personal will, it's sort of being able to automatically shift from my will to thy will. And you're genuinely just able to be present, and you're able to be responsive, and you're able to tune in, and you're able to listen what is highest good in this moment. And then each individual has our own talents and our own skill set. And so we will each be guided to share generously of our talents and our skills according to our talents and our skills, like using our voice, our accent, our ability to be helpful and hopeful wherever we are. But I would say as well that as soon as we have the gift of coming into contact with a person like that, I'm so grateful that you had that ability. It sparks, I would say, a self-remembrance within. And we say, oh, I would like to cultivate that in myself. And then, yeah, so I would love to hear more about your story. I'm happy to share some of my story as well, but just like what it's like to come into contact with that and then to cultivate that within yourself. And you gradually learn to expand your circle of kindness until it includes every single human on the planet, no matter what, unconditionally.
We will have to talk about the metta meditation in a little bit, but first, you said a couple of things, and I think they deserve being unpacked a little bit. One, you mentioned your authentic self or your true self. Then you mentioned overcoming the hardness of heart. And I just want to unpack that for a minute because I think what that speaks to is that we are born and come into this world with a certain kindness of heart. In the popular psychology, in a popular psychology, they call that the natural child. And then they talk about the adapted child as life begins to hit us and literally sometimes just smacks us in the face, sometimes, unfortunately, literally, many times figuratively. But we start to find ways of coping with it, and they might not always be helpful and they not always be skillful. But we develop this kind of hardness as a way of coping. And then you mentioned that the religious traditions try to take us back and soften that hardness of heart to get back to what we originally were. So let's unpack that a little bit and talk a little bit about how that happens and maybe even the process of how we go about softening that hardened heart.
Sure. So, I mean, when you were talking, that was so eloquently formulated as well. I was remembering someone who was a kindergarten teacher who told me about a student she had taught as a kindergartner, and he came back after he graduated from high school and he said to her, "You're the reason I graduated from high school, and I just want to say thank you because
Mm,
you were the first person in my life who was kind to me." And so he received kindness probably like age 5 or 6 when he was in kindergarten, and that was the first time in his life. And so what that means is for that particular beautiful human, that he was born into a situation where the adults in his life weren't able to reflect kindness to him. And so then the kindergarten teacher was the first person who was able to be in that energy. And then he realized this is possible. And then that helped him educate himself. Like he was talking about education in school ways, but also I think he was talking about education in that heart way as well. I don't know what his religious background was or if he had one. But so that's an example of no matter what our exposure has been to kindness or harshness, we could use that at some point kindness will cross our path and give us this invitation to come back into awareness of kindness. And so I would say that there's a process of it takes a willingness to open your heart and allow yourself to receive kindness. And if you've closed your heart because it hurts, because you've been subject to pain or trauma or abuse or unkindness, then there is a learning. Okay, with this kindergarten teacher, I'm safe to open my heart. And so it's safe for me to give kindness, it's safe for me to receive kindness. But presumably, that person still would have at home had to navigate the situations of not kindness. And so there is like this, you could call it code switching or something like that, that beautiful being probably had to learn in order to safely navigate the situations at home. And then as that person, graduated from high school, then that person has the opportunity as an adult to keep giving themselves kindness. And there's many humans who have done this, then who choose to heal the patterns within themselves so that in turn, when they form a family and they have kids, then they choose consciously, I choose to pass on kindness to my kids, even though my parents weren't able to pass on kindness to me. And so it is like, I would say it's a heart aching, it's a heart aching process. Like even to think about that little 5-year-old and that he had to live 5 years until he received kindness, that makes my heart ache. And then there is this sort of process for each human that chances are we all have our different experiences. We all have our different sort of, if I, each human listening will say, okay, maybe I was born to kind parents. They generally had the ability to be kind to me. But then maybe you experienced some meanness at school or bullying at school. And that's a thing that often happens, like whether it's on the playground in elementary school or it might be in middle school. And so then you get to figure out, how do I navigate that from a place of integrity so that I come from strength, I come from skill, I come from wisdom, I come from courage. I don't allow myself to be made into a doormat or a punching bag. But also, you might not be a person who generally responds to aggression with aggression. And so each person has their own personality profile, their own strengths, and their own skills to figure out how to navigate these situations. And it's a process of, I would say, we're probably never done with it, but it is a process of just, we love ourselves forward. So in relation to anywhere that we've experienced something other than kindness, we stand in the light, we open our hearts, and we invite the divine to meet us right
Mm.
where we are. And the more that we do that, the more the divine fills us with, I would call it divine love, whatever your listeners' names are. There's a kind of grace that is larger than the human, that allows us to lift ourselves when we become ready to lift ourselves and move forward when we're
Mm.
ready to move forward.
The what you are describing to me sounds metaphorically like the Christian way. Let me explain what I mean by that. Yes, I am completely aware that many people in the Christian faith feel that you have to accept the person and being of Jesus in order to be saved. But there are also many Christians who see that as metaphorical. And when you described the kindness that entered this young boy's heart when he was 5 years old, from a in a Christian way, especially since we have the triad, which we have, God and the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and that they're three manifestations of one, then what you would be saying in a Christian vein would be, at 5 years old, kindness entered this boy's heart. And we could say it was his kindergarten teacher, or we could say it was the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit entered his heart, and it gave him that invitation to cultivate it within himself. So it is very, very parallel to the concept of allowing Jesus into your heart and learning to walk the way.
I would agree with you very much. And as you were talking, I was also thinking, my understanding is that we are all asked to be the hands of Jesus, the heart of
Mhm.
Jesus, the eyes of Jesus, like to be that energy of kindness. And from my perspective, this is universal. So I know some listeners call themselves, yes, I'm Christian, but some listeners might say, maybe I grew up Christian, and I'm not sure if I would call myself that now. But however you would describe yourself, from my perspective, it's a universal human imperative that we are kind. Be ye kind, tenderhearted, loving one another, and forgiving one another, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. I think that's universal. It's
Absolutely.
every human on
Mhm.
the planet is invited to be that and to do that and to live that.
So, just so that our audience knows the listening that you're speaking into, give us a little bit about your spiritual path, because after we have that, I want to ask you some about how these things are taught from the Eastern perspective.
Yep.
But let's hear a little bit about your spiritual path first, so we know
Abs-
where you're coming from, so to speak.
Yeah, so my name is Swami Nityananda. That was the name given me by my teacher, who was Swami Shankarananda. And he founded our meditation community in 1974. We are geographically in Baltimore, Maryland. We share the teachings of yoga philosophy and meditation around the world, as well as in Baltimore, Maryland. And so yoga philosophy basically says everyone is a child of God. And so we all are invited to treat everyone with universal goodwill, universal respect, universal kindness. And we are essentially to be here to be helpful and hopeful for one another. And so we're never done with that. We're always expanding, we're always growing in our awareness, we're always growing in our ability to be generous and to be present. And So I met my teacher in 2010, and I walked in the door to a Friday night meditation that he was leading, and he was like sunshine in human form. And the moment that I saw him, it was just like this light bulb moment. And I had already practiced yoga asana. Yoga asana are yoga postures, which are taught in yoga studios. And I had already started meditating as well. I think for maybe it was like 6 to 8 years before I met my teacher. And then the moment I recognized my teacher, I sort of knew, like, this is where I am to be. And my teacher recognized me as his successor, and he trained me, and he consecrated me as a Swami in 2014. So he passed, he left the body in 2014. And since then, I've been teaching meditation and yoga philosophy. We welcome people from all backgrounds. So you can be Christian and meditate. You can come from an African American church and meditate. You can be Buddhist or Hindu or Muslim. You can be spiritual and meditate. And so we recognize that Jesus's teachings are teachings of truth. And I was mentioning this earlier. They call all humans to live this forgiveness, this kindness, this tenderness of heart. And then also, I would say that the teachings in the Hebrew Bible, the Christian Old Testament, that teach us, like, be still and know that I am God, is an invitation for each human to cultivate enough quiet within the human mind and the human heart so that we're able to respond when the divine quietly taps us on the shoulder and says, this is simple and it's practical. It's like, go check on that neighbor. Like, go clean the snow off that neighbor's car. Go see if that neighbor's okay. Or, like, I think family members have this happen where you just know, I need to reach out to this family member, or I need to just ask my friend, how are you doing? Are you okay? Like, what's going on? And so I would say, like, for all of us, we're part of this connectedness to divine awareness, which just makes sense because we're all children of the divine. And so where we are at Awake Yoga Meditation, we just cultivate this. This is what we're dedicated to always, is meditation, studying the teachings of truth, but also it's very much living the teachings of truth in my daily life with my family, my friends, my work, my body, my heart, my mind, like all aspects of my life. And so we're never done. And that's just like a little brief intro. I'm happy to say
Yeah,
more.
yeah. No, I was thinking as you were speaking, I was thinking that um, in some Bibles, the words of Jesus are printed in red. The red letter Bibles, which gives us the feeling that every single word said by him was important. And when he was asked for his two great commandments, he said, "Love your God with all of your heart and soul." But he added something else. He said, "Your heart and your soul and your mind." And if we're going to take every single word as being important, then he was really reporting that be still and know that I am God. Because if your mind is full of that chatter and committee in your head that's always being deprecatory and the like, there's not a lot of room left to love God. And so when you say with your heart and your soul and your mind, with every part of you, sometimes we forget that we need to cultivate a quiet mind.
I love what you said, and I would very much agree. So, just sort of thinking about a common human feature, I think for a lot of people, there's what I think it's called these days negative self talk.
Hmm.
So, like, a lot of that internal monologue or internal dialogue, however your brain works, is sort of telling you things like, you should be disgusted with yourself
Hmm.
because of X, Y, or Z. And it's
Not
not
good enough. Not
right,
good enough.
right.
Especially that you're not pretty enough, not thin enough, not smart enough, not, yeah.
Exactly. And so, I mean, I think some scientists who have looked at this have said up to 95% of the thoughts that we direct at ourselves are negative, and they're also repetitive. And so, what happens is our thinking can get in a loop, and it's not a happy, healthy, productive loop that is encouraging us to be aware and present and of service. So, I want to be really clear, self reflection is very important, but self-deprecation or self denigration is not so helpful. So what you want to do is practice self-reflection, have self-awareness, but then keep the wisdom. And gradually it is possible to retrain your own self-talk so that your self-talk becomes something more like you're doing the best you know how to do. You're gaining an ability to be kind to this person in your life who gives you opportunity to practice unconditional love. And so then what happens is you almost become, so the basic premise is learn to treat yourself with as much kindness as you would treat a friend that you really care about or a family member that you really care about. And so it's not be blind to your own faults or justify them, but it's also just treat yourself with kindness. And that actually allows you to self transform with greater ease and with greater grace if you're extending that kindness to yourself. The same way, like, if you think about this, a friend would much rather be with you if you're being kind to your friend. So be with yourself in that same energy of friendship, and you become much more fun for yourself to be with then too.
Then too. So you mentioned the word a couple of times, and I want to kind of unpack that as well. The word cultivate. And I get, people, like you and me who meditate and we do that. We talk about cultivating generosity, cultivating gratitude, cultivating compassion. And let's unpack that a little bit, because a lot of people will hear what you're saying and they'll say, yeah, that's fine for other people, but not for me. Or if you want me to retrain my mind, like, how am I supposed to do that? It never shuts up, and the like. And, the ancients, the people, for thousands of years ago, you know, the, the funny, I mean, I don't know what the word is. I'll say funny. The funny part of it is that they were just like us, and they were trying to figure out, how can we figure out a way to retrain our minds, and they came up with practices, like ways to do it. So and that, I think, is what we're talking about when we say the word cultivate. It's actually engaging in a practice. And let me just say one more little thing about that. It's funny that if you decide that you want to play golf, so you'll go out and somebody will show you how to swing the club, and you will be lousy at it. But the way that you get good at it is you swing it again and again and again and again until it becomes muscle memory, until it becomes natural. This is now my swing. That was my swing. Now this is my swing. And so when we engage in these practices, I think the repetition, doing them again and again and again, is just like learning how to swing a golf club. It has to become, you have to own it. Um, so let's talk about that a little bit from your training.
Absolutely. I mean, I love your example. And it's really fun because, well, so I was thinking it's the same learning anything. Like if you're learning music, you don't expect yourself to sit down and be Mozart. You expect
Mhm.
yourself to practice regularly, and then you gain in skill. And if you want to be a doctor, you don't expect yourself to snap your fingers and be a doctor. You realize there are years of practice and learning and growth and training. And then it's a continual ongoing learning and growth and training. Like doctors are never done learning and growing and training. And so from my perspective, meditation is exactly that same way. And coming to self mastery in terms of our own mind is exactly that way too. But let me give you a really specific example that came when you were talking. So this is from an actual human, and it's someone who was going through a divorce, and she started a gratitude practice. So she started it with a friend. Going through a divorce, I'm sure your listeners know, but emotionally brutal, right? Like a really, really challenging time for her emotionally. She practiced gratitude with a friend. And this is like you choose a friend, maybe you text your friend one time a day something that you're grateful for, and your friend texts you one time a day something that your friend is grateful for. So they did this for a year, and it changed both of their lives. And so that's an example, just like choosing to consistently focus on one thing I'm grateful for, her life transformed. Like, not only did she heal from the divorce, but her life forevermore transformed. So after that, she ended up dedicating herself to being of service to the divine. And so this is an example, like, you can't always predict what's going to happen, but you can predict that the Buddha said, drop by drop, the bucket is full. So one drop of kindness, it's a drop in the bucket. And just every single word that you speak that is kind, it is accumulating kindness. And your energy shifts, your patterns of thinking shift. So, this is something that yogis have known for millennia, but also functional magnetic resonance imaging is now able to show this as well. The brain
It
changes.
just does.
So, as you move from self judgment to self acceptance, and again, it's not that you're justifying weakness, it's that you're bringing kindness into your self transformation. As you move from anger to compassion, you actually change your brain. And so, what happens is memory, focus, emotional self regulation increase. Your ability to be present, your ability, excuse me, to let go of the part of your brain that is reactive and that is fear based, that ability changes. The size and the function of the amygdala actually changes. The amygdala is the stress response part of your brain that activates and says you should really be angry, you should be violent, you should respond with negativity because someone was mean to you, someone was negative to you, and the brain changes in measurable ways. And so it's a really interesting time. Just in fairly recent years, Western brain science has been able to validate and look at, using current scientific instruments, what the yogis have taught for millennia. So it's very cool. And I think
It
for a
is
lot of
cool.
people,
Yeah.
it really helps. Like, you can see this on a
Yeah.
brain.
Yeah. 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 There's another example that let's say somebody's hearing that they're going, yeah, yeah, but here's another example that's very non-controversial. So the taxi drivers in London, before they're given a license, they have to learn every single street and turn and little road and alleyway and the like, and they're tested on it. So they decided that they would take an MRI, if that's the right term, but a picture of their brains, but especially the hippocampus. Well, there's two of them, so I guess it's really hippocampi, of the hippocampi. And they took a picture of them and measured them. And now this is the part of the brain that has to do with directional understanding and sense and spatial cognizance. This is the part of the brain that does that. So they went and they studied for months to learn all of these streets and everything. And then they took a picture of the hippocampi again, and it had grown taller, longer, wider, and thicker. So the brain matter inside it was even more dense. So, I mean, that is very, very, definitive proof that that the mind can change the brain. And the mind can change the brain to make the brain be more of what the mind wants it to be.
I love it. It's so healing and freeing and self-empowering for all humans to realize this. And so this is neuroplasticity. And what this says is, like, even if you have known pain, like, I will talk to humans who sometimes say the first 60 years of my life I spent in sadness and pain. And then they start meditating, and within 6 months, they're feeling joy consistently, daily, for the first time in their lives. Like, that is dramatic. And it's something that every human can put to the test. You can just practice gratitude every day and notice how your own brain shifts and how your own feelings about yourself and your life and your relationship shift.
Hmm. So now I want to ask you about, a concept, an idea, something that I always hesitate to use the word believe, because for me everything is just simply a present working hypothesis. Um, until if there's more data that's inconsistent with it, I'm willing to change. But it's kind of like my current hypothesis between the East and the West. And I think that, especially in Buddhism, which is a non-deistic, a non-God oriented philosophy, um, they pretty much say, look, as far as the cosmos goes, that's for you to figure out. But I'll tell you this: if you practice and cultivate compassion and loving kindness and generosity and grace and forgiveness, if you cultivate those things, you're going to understand how the universe works. Whereas in the West, we say, well, you know, we're going to tell you how the universe works and we're going to tell you what the deities are. But if you accept them into your heart, they will help you to find the way. But what the East doesn't have is, well, they do have many, many different monks like Ananda and many, many others who, are put up as very graceful and loving, but a single example of unconditional love that is placed at the top of the table is something that Christianity offers and that the West offers. Buddhism offers the teachings of how to develop the grace and generosity and the like. And that's why I always think that when it all comes together, to have the training of developing unconditional love and a model of unconditional love, that the two of them together can be very powerful.
I love it. I mean, when I read the way that Jesus moves through the world, when you meditate and reflect on the scriptures, from my perspective, that's what he's sharing. Like when the healing miracles happen, he's sharing unconditional love. And he is just this embodiment of unconditional love. And so you're right, like it's really powerful to reflect on that and then to practice cultivating unconditional love within yourself, just day by day, thought by thought, word by word. So we're always choosing, am I coming from unconditional love? And then the other thing that I would say for someone who is new to this practice, if you notice that you're stepping out of unconditional love, then just notice and choose to step back in. And so don't berate yourself. Just say, okay, this next breath, this next moment, this next choice, I can choose to step back in to unconditional love. And gradually what happens is it does become possible to just be established in it. So that's one of my friends says that's your come from, right? So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so just for each person to know, like, what is my come from now and what would I like my come from to be? And it's something that we can shift. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that we can grow. So we
Yeah.
can expand in our ability to come from that kindness.
You mentioned before that, it's a drop in the bucket and that, people practice for years and are good, do everything and do it right now. And culture says, oh, wow, I've got to practice this for years. I don't know if I want to do that. But I'll tell you, this is what I say to my students when I mention that this is a process and it takes time, and they want immediate results. I say, look, if you're not happy with the fact that this is going to take 10 years, well, okay. But you're going to arrive at 10 years from now, whether you like it or not. The only question is how you're going to arrive there. The time is going to go by anyway. So you might as well arrive there in a happier state of mind.
I love it. And I would agree. Like I think that well, I like what one of the things that came through, like you didn't say this in words, but I think there's also a joy. There's a joy to coming from kindness. And so there's
Mm,
also like a playfulness, a creativity, like a curiosity, an innocence that comes into our life when we say, okay, I'm going to come from kindness. And so there's a lot of little kids who live in my neighborhood, and I just have so much fun watching them all interact with each other and share toys. And the parents kind of, stand outside while all the kids play. And so there's like a lot of parent support going on from parent to parent. It's like it's just so fun to watch. But you can kind of see just this wonder and this inventiveness and this magic and this awe. Like kids are so excited by the flower, the rock, the leaf, and the tree changing color. And so when you come into that, I'm going to come from kindness, it's kind of coming back into that innocence. So I want to be clear, like, you keep your hard-earned adult wisdom, you keep your intelligence, you keep all the training and all of the skills that you've gained. But it's like you gain that basic foundational wonder, which makes life really fun. And I would say it also increases, just as you move through the world in this way, you will end up interacting with other humans you would not otherwise interact with, because the human brain just kind of, I don't know, it maybe goes on autopilot a little. Like, if you've ever seen those horses and they have the blinkers so they can't look to left or right. But it's excuse me, if you choose to come from kindness, it's like the blinkers go off, and then you're seeing a much wider panorama, and humans enter your experience that you otherwise wouldn't encounter. And
Hmm.
they're amazing. That everyone, from my experience, everyone has wisdom to share. Everyone
Absolutely.
has
Hmm.
gone through amazing things. And if you just listen, you will learn amazing things that you could never learn in a book, just by being present in daily life and listening to all these incredible humans.
Yeah. And what you're saying is more literal than figurative, because what they have found now, that when well, first of all, being in a coming from kindness, you are generally, kindness and stress really are kind of mutually exclusive, not completely. You sometimes you can be kind and stressed, because stress has a function to give you the energy to do things that must be done, and that is the evolutionary function of stress. But being overstressed or stressed out or overwhelmed, is that's kind of mutually exclusive with kindness. And so when we're coming from kindness, we're literally more calm. And what they have discovered is that not only does the brain narrow and focus when you're stressed to try to resolve whatever problem is stressing you out, and it broadens and builds when you are relaxed, but your peripheral vision actually literally increases when you are calm as opposed to stress. So you literally see the world more broadly.
Absolutely love it. Yeah, and so also, because I'm sure a lot of your listeners, I love how you put that, and I'm sure a lot of your listeners are really creative people as well. And so that means, like, as a basic function of what you were just talking about, that if you can come from kindness, activate that calm response within yourself, expand your vision, then you're in contact with your parasympathetic nervous system,
Hmm.
which is what's online when you're able to be creative. And so
Hmm.
you're also just sort of like opening the tap for creativity, which is so exciting. And I want to say there's so many ways of being creative. So parents are creative, grandparents are creative, kids are creative, like engineers are creative. From my perspective, it's not only artists or musicians who are creative. I think all humans are creative. And so it's like, then you are opening this tap so that your reason for being here, like your unique talents and your skills, are able to be fully online, which, I mean, how fun is that? That's
How
incredible.
how fun is that? And one of the things that we mentioned, we talk about, uh, you have to learn, you meditate, or we use other things and cultivate and skills, and it takes years and blah blah blah. But I think, well, let me ask you the question. I kind of think, and I phrase this as a question. How do you think, in terms of that it's a two-way street? Even, yes, if you cultivate these things, you will develop a sense of awe and wonder and curiosity and expansiveness. But if you expose yourself to things that are beautiful, if you expose yourself to awe, it goes back the other way, and it leads to a more kinder self. So it's like a two-way street. Yes, what do you think?
I love it. I mean, I was just thinking, I love being out in nature. And so that's a really good example. Like, if you're out in nature and you're just, this can be anywhere. Like, I live in the city and I can walk outside and see a tree and connect with the beauty of the seasons. Right now, it's autumn where I
Hmm.
am. And so just like things are changing every day. And if you notice, there's this kind of majesty that happens without our doing anything. There's this huge kind of grand symphony of seasonal change that's going on, and I'm not orchestrating any of it. And so for me, just to stand there and be amazed, and then that feeling of amazement, I would agree, like it comes back into all of my daily tasks, my conversations with my family, with my friends, with my colleagues, with people I encounter being of service at the meditation center. And I would say this is universally true for every listener to just notice, like, can I make a more conscious effort? And this is simple. It's right where you are. It's like, can I notice the energy of the sun when it's rising, or the energy of the sun when it's setting? Can I notice the night stars? Can I notice the night sky? Can I notice the sun? And then allow my body to be. There's a kind of way that I think we naturally come into balance, or we come into harmony, if I'm in tune with the rise of the sun and the setting of the sun and the movements of the seasons. And it overrides, you were talking about that almost like overly on stress response that we can find ourselves in. Sometimes I think that our culture invites us, I mean, we all have done this, but we override our own natural awareness of, like, okay, my brain's really tired right now. I would learn more if I were able to take a 30-second break. But sometimes we have to keep going, right? Like, you're in grad school, or you're in law school, or you're working on a case, or you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. And you just sort of like override that signal. The brain is like, okay, I'm saturated, I'm full, can we take a break? And you're like, no, because we have 500 pages of material to assimilate right now, or whatever the listener's equivalent is. But I think if we can, it can happen with just brief, like just brief. I can take a breath right now. I can center myself right now. I can be in contact with the energy of my heart right now. And so there's really interesting scientific studies about heart coherence and the way that that can help the brain function as well. So even just, I'm breathing into my heart 3 breaths, and that helps deactivate that overactive sympathetic nervous system, and it helps reactivate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is what's online if we're meditating, or we're taking a walk in nature, we're hugging a child or a grandchild, smiling at a friend, we're seeing a beautiful work of art, listening to beautiful music. And so this, I think it's very freeing and empowering for ordinary humans, for everyone in daily life, just to know I can take a breath into my heart any moment, and it helps my physiology, it helps my brain, it helps my relationships, it helps my immune system, it helps my physical and emotional and mental well-being.
Well, Swami, we could talk on and on. We haven't even touched on your 25 years teaching literature. We haven't touched on your PhD. We haven't touched on so many parts of your life. We haven't touched on so many aspects of Eastern and Western thinking that would be helpful. So I want to ask you, will you come back?
Of course, it would be a joy to talk again.
Okay, great. And if some folks want to get in touch with you, of course, we'll have your links in the show notes, but let them know if they wanted to follow up on something they've heard you say today or the like, how can they get in touch with you, or through your organization, or how's that?
Absolutely. And first of all, just blessings and joy to you and your wife and to all listeners. And you can reach me at Swami at awakeyogameditation.org if you want to send me an email. Awakeyogameditation.org is our website. We're also on YouTube, and we're on Substack, we're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. So if you want to just watch some of our teachings on video, that's a really fun way to connect too.
That's great. And of course, we'll have all those links in the show notes. And I have an announcement today. My friends, my team, and I have decided that we're going to create an online community of people who are having wise and happy lives. And it will have guided meditations and instructional videos, but it'll also have a place just to connect and share the tips and tricks and traps of living a meaningful, purposeful life of service. So stay tuned, and I'll be, as we develop it, I'll be announcing it and giving you some information about how to join that community. And Swami, thank you so much for joining us today, and we will have you back.
Thank you with great joy.